Good morning, everyone. A good Shabbos. Someone once said, if you could see the invisible, you could do the impossible. You know, this week's parsha, Yosef reveals himself to his brothers. And in last week's parsha, it says when the brothers came to Egypt, he recognized them, but they didn't recognize him. Why? Because they see this Egyptian ruler dressed in Egyptian garb, and suddenly what comes out of his mouth? I am Yosef, your brother. Imagine their shock. It was the last thing they could have imagined, that this viceroy, this Egyptian ruler, is their actual brother Yosef. And what they realized at that moment was that they misjudged Yosef all along. They always looked at Joseph as the black sheep in the family, the kid with these crazy dreams. And they got rid of him because they thought he was a threat to the Jewish family. They sold him into slavery. And suddenly they realized he was Yosef. He was the great man with all the great dreams. He was right. They were wrong. That on the outside he may have appeared to be one thing, but on the inside he was a completely different person. He was Yosef HaTzadik. And the obvious lesson is to be very hesitant and very reluctant to judge people on the external facade. You never know what a person's true inner dimension and capacity and capabilities are. And sometimes in life you're shocked to realize that what you thought was completely the opposite. They thought Joseph was this renegade brother. It turns out he was the tzaddik of the family, the man with these great aspirations and these great dreams, and indeed they misjudged him and misunderstood who he truly was. There's a story, true story, about this religious man in Yerushalayim. He went to shul Friday night. They davened Friday night Shabbos davening. After davening, he went over to the rabbi, said good Shabbos. As he was heading out the door, he sees a Sephardic-looking kid, dark skin, curly black hair, with a backpack, with a kippah on, leaning against the side wall of the shul. He doesn't recognize this guy. So he goes over to him, he says, what's your name? He says, my name is Machmi. He says, you have a place to eat tonight? He says, no. He says, you want to come to my house for Shabbat dinner? He said, I'll be delighted. This is all in Hebrew. He invites him to his house. They start with the Kiddush and, Shalom Aleichem and Kiddush, and they start the meal. He starts with words of Torah, conversation, they sing the song. And this kid is like not engaging in the songs. He doesn't seem to know any of the songs. So he sings a Sephardic song. Maybe he knows a Sephardic song. No singing. Finally he says, is there a song you like maybe that you want to sing? He says to this teenager, this young boy. He says, well, I don't know. There was a song they sang in the synagogue I really liked. He says, which song? He's thinking. He says, I don't know, they kept on saying the word Dodi, Dodi. He says, you mean L'cha Dodi? He says, yeah, that was it. He says, we usually don't sing it at the dinner table, we sing it, but if you want to sing it, we could sing it. So they sing L'cha Dodi. They serve the next course. After the next course, he says, is there another song you like? He says, I really want to sing that Dodi song again. After the third time of requesting the same song, he said to him, tell me, where are you from? Where in Israel do you live? He says, I'm from Ramallah. The host turns white. He says, you mean Ramla, which is a Jewish community? He says, no, Ramallah. He says, but I thought there are no Jews in Ramallah. He says, you're right, there are no Jews in Ramallah. He got shocked. He said, and then this kid goes on to say, truth is, I have to tell you, my real name is Muhammad. The host thought this is a terrorist in his house with a backpack. He says, but don't be afraid. He says, let me tell you why I'm here. He said, I grew up in a house where my father was always spewing hatred against the Jews and the Yehuds, they did this, they did that. And I would always argue with my father and say, what have they done? Why are they so bad? And my father would hit me and scream at me, and I wouldn't buy all the propaganda. And something didn't settle with me. And one day, my father yelled at me and hit me for questioning his hatred of the Jews. And I said, that's it. If he's going to tell me all these horrible things about the Jews, I'm going to go find out firsthand who they are. So I went into my room, I started putting together my stuff. My mother came in. My mother would always come in after my father hit me and say, what's the matter? Well, where are you going? I said, I'm going to live amongst the Jews for a while. I want to see what they're really all about. Is it true what my father's telling me? And his mother starts crying. He said, my mother starts crying. I said, don't worry, I'll come back. I'm just going for a little while. She said, I'm not crying tears of sadness. I'm crying tears of joy. She said, I have a secret to tell you. I never told you. He says, what? He says, you're Jewish. He says, I'm Jewish. What do you mean? He says, I was a Jewish girl. I met your father in Israel. He was working. I fell in love with him. I married him. I moved here to Ramallah, and I became Muslim. But really, I'm a Jew. And in Judaism, if the mother's Jewish, you're Jewish, which means you're Jewish. The kid was shocked. And she says, not only that, we come from a very great rabbi. And she goes into the other room, she comes back with a photograph, and she says, this is a picture of the grave of your great-great-grandfather, and take it with you. He says, I put the photo in my backpack, and I came into Israel, and I went into a synagogue, and then you invited me home. And I want to know more about the Jewish people. The host says to him, do you have that photograph your mother gave you? He says, yeah. He goes through his backpack, he takes out the photograph, the host looks at it, and suddenly he starts crying. He says, what's the matter? He says, do you know whose grave this is? Your great-grandfather. He says, who? He says, this is a grave in Svat of a 17th century rabbi, a great Kabbalist by the name of Rabbi Shlomo Alkabatz. And he is the author of the Lecha Dodi prayer. And now I know why you're so attached to the song and why you're so attached to the Jewish people. And indeed, you've come home. And the lesson obviously is, we never know who someone is on the inside. Never judge a book by that cover, as they say. And we have to realize there are Josephs all around us, people who may appear to be dressed in different guises, whether they're physical guises, psychological guises, emotional guises, but we have to always remember the real essence of a person is their Jewish soul, and we should never give up on our fellow Jew, just like Jacob and the family never gave up on Yosef.